Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, America. My name is Squeak, and we really need to talk. First off, I want to apologize for this episode being a little late. I've been a little under the weather lately, so yeah. Also, the next episode is going to be a little bit early. The reason? Well, I figure I upload on Mondays. Christmas is on a Monday this year, and I'd rather see all of you fine folks spending Christmas with your families. You know, those people that you live with who sometimes show up at your house unannounced and demand food, and in this case, they're probably demanding presents. I'm kidding. No, but seriously, though, I do want you guys to be able to enjoy Christmas with your families. So we're going to have the next episode uploaded early. So this episode's late, next episode's early, kind of evens itself out. Anyway, this week, the presumption of innocence officially drops dead. We compare British and American interpretations of the cost of healthcare. A DNA testing company accuses all white people of racism by default. And a would-be jihadist blows his own balls off. All this and more this week on the Squeakly Report. We, the American people, are at war. How many rich cigar-chomping megalomaniac health insurance CEOs doubling their profits? How many people have to die before we're willing to admit that we have a problem here? My name is Squeak Attack. Get used to me. I'll try not to flip my lid too much. New York. It's a beautiful city. In a state as beautiful as blue can be. Probably the most famous city in all of North America, one of the most famous the world over, maybe behind London and Tokyo. They have two Major League Baseball teams, the Mets in Queens and the Yankees in the Bronx. It's a city so famous with such bravado that there are two NFL teams headquartered in New Jersey that have claimed the New York moniker. The streets will make you feel brand new and big lights will inspire you. Buildings towering to the sky, it's out of sight in the dead of night. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. You got Broadway shows, Central Park, MoMA, the Statue of Liberty, even the most famous concert venue in all the world in Madison Square Garden. Then you have their massive bus terminal, the Port Authority. Also the most expensive place in the world to buy a vitamin water if you didn't know. A Qaeda from Bangladesh tried to blow them up with a pipe bomb. Now while $2.75 for a bottle of watered down Kool-Aid is a bit excessive, it's not a good reason to try to blow the place up. Ever see the Jeff Dunham skit with a terrorist whose bomb goes off prematurely and kills him instead? Yeah. Same story. So this guy, his bomb goes off, severely injuring him, 5 other people who were nearby. No casualties, thank God. Thank God the idiot did not know what he was doing, or things could have turned out a lot worse. So how was this Bangladeshi citizen in New York? I mean, it's a country you don't really hear much of. We don't have a lot of immigration from Bangladesh. Chain migration. Yeah, I kid you not, chain migration. That's the thing now. It's been a thing all these years and we just haven't paid attention to it. Spare you all the boring technical stuff here in the US, it's basically when a person is granted more lax requirements when immigrating or taking up temporary or permanent residence here due to the left's crazy idea that familial ties are the best gauge of character and intent, and thus the government makes it easier to reunite with family members who have previously emigrated to the country. So apparently, the scrutiny we should be striving for in our vetting process, no, that doesn't matter. We've got families to unite. That's what the left cares about. They don't care about the fact that these people could very well be dangerous. They could be criminals in their home countries. This guy wasn't. But who knows? The next guy who comes in could be. What was this sack of crap's motivation? Well, for starters, he's from Bangladesh, a majority Muslim nation, like 90% Muslim. Though being separated physically from the Middle East by the Indian subcontinent, they tend to be fairly well removed from a lot of the Middle East political culture. As such, their political culture has evolved a step further. Still not to the point where they can truly understand what it would be like living in, say, Seoul, South Korea, or Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, but they do have a better grasp of their role in the modern world than, say, Iran or Iraq. The same is true with the islands that make up Indonesia, actually. Less terror. Why? Because Islam itself and the political culture of war and social martyrdom work in tandem to fuel the massive issues we're seeing cropping up, not just the backwards violent ideology. As a result, when you have people who live on an island or in a country like Bangladesh, where they're fairly removed from all the radicalization, they tend to interpret the Quran more just on a spiritual level without political influence. Now, don't get me wrong. As the world shrinks technologically, we're going to start seeing more and more Southeast Asian Muslims becoming radicalized, but at least for the time being, we can safely say this radicalization is not directly tied to ISIS or any other such group. Same is true with this Ula guy who, like I said, tried to blow up a bus terminal. ISIS actually went and denied involvement due to the lack of casualties. You know, you're a sucky terrorist when even ISIS doesn't want anything to do with you. Oh, and Christmas decorations, yeah. Ula said he was motivated by posters depicting Christmas themes. But no, there's no war on Christmas or anything like that going on. Just people trying to blow each other up over Santa Claus and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. This week, for our analysis on the war on Christmas, we're actually going to be entertaining arguments against Christmas as it stands. And believe it or not, it's actually hard to find arguments against the holiday itself in general. Instead, what I found was a buttload of BS bouncing between Christ was not born in December and Christ didn't exist to begin with. However, to avoid being completely hyperbolic, I decided to read through some articles and analyze arguments that oppose mine. The problem is just how predictable these arguments are. They're saying the same things over and over and over again, year in, year out, and all it's doing is just reinforcing this backwards ideology of control, control, control. Progressives are predictable. They don't think for themselves. They spread their ideology amongst one another. It's kind of like, for example, when you have these kids who are becoming atheists nowadays, you don't become an atheist on your own. You become an atheist because somebody who you believe to be in some way superior to a preacher told you that you should be an atheist. Nobody comes up with these things on their own. And that's my biggest argument for creationism over raw evolution. I'm not saying evolution didn't happen. Evolution and creationism actually go hand in hand. But what I'm saying is, if you have multiple people who did not make contact with one another previously, who are all coming up with these same themes, these same divine entities and concepts, meanwhile you have atheism, which all that requires is that you hear someone else talk about it. It spreads from mouth to mouth. I'm just saying, I think deism is more natural. It makes more sense. Now, according to thebalance.com, a fairly, I don't want to say fairly, actually an incredibly backwards thinking, regressive leftist publication, here's what they say about Christmas. Because many stories tap into the cash value of Christmas with their plethora of Santas, ornaments, and Christmas fanfare at your nearby mall, you can easily overlook the depths of the diversity present in America during the holiday season. And yes, I'm pronouncing all these words wrong intentionally. Acting inclusively used to mean sending out politically correct happy holidays, greeting cards, and changing Christmas office parties to holiday parties. Today, celebrating inclusiveness and diversity is about more than just changing labels and titles. Celebrating diversity and inclusiveness is about using the holiday celebration time with friends and family to build understanding and awareness of the traditions and beliefs of others. And yes, I have a man bun, and yes, I am drinking Fiji water. I can't keep that up. I'm sorry. It's hard to even read that aloud. So now policing the language we use and the assumption we oftentimes make that not only will people we talk to be of the 95+% who do in fact celebrate Christmas in this country in some way, shape, or form, but we also assume they're of the 99% who aren't so easily offended. That's not enough. It's like me. When my Jewish friends wish me happy Hanukkah, mostly as a joke, but still I take it to heart. Optimistically, way too optimistically I should say, I interpret that as, hey man, I hope these 8 days are good to you. And yes, there are in fact more people put off by happy holidays more so than Merry Christmas, than vice versa. Maybe not outright offended or triggered, but still put off. Conservatives tend to be that. We keep to ourselves. We don't tell you what we think all the time. And that's why we're so scattered among this country, because the loudest voices in the room are all on the left. It doesn't matter, though. We're still judging you as pretentious when you come up to us and say happy holidays and happy federal holiday and crap like that. Friends and family? Well, my whole family celebrates Christmas, both the whites and the Native Americans. Yeah, I have Native Americans in my family. Fun fact. Friends? Most of my friends are white or Hispanic, all of whom celebrate Christmas. Except the Jewish ones, and you know something? Even most of them celebrate Christmas. Yeah, but don't you want to make more friends who might not celebrate Christmas? No, because the people you're talking about already want me dead. No, thank you. Then they go on and say you should avoid using things like Christmas trees and stockings in your decor, for the sake of, again, diversity. That's their favorite word. Diversity. Diversity. We decorated where I work. We asked everyone if any of our decorations, trees, peppermints, etc., were offensive to anyone. Yet one white guy, one self-righteous white SOB, who raised his hand, and everyone else, black, white, Hispanic, etc., looked at him. One woman then told him to shut up. And that was the end of it. So then you have HuffPo. They say we should be finding out what people celebrate beforehand and then greeting them appropriately. No. Just no. My chances of saying Merry Christmas to a Jew or an angry type Muslim are far less worrying to me than the amount of time it would take to do the research beforehand to figure out what they want me to say to them. It's like how now we're expected to figure out a person's gender identity preference in advance. It's ridiculous. Know what? ask me before we shake hands which hand I prefer to shake with, because I'm left-handed and can grip things fairly well with my left hand, can't grip very well with my right hand, partially due to the fact that I am, again, a southpaw, and partially due to a childhood accident that left my right arm significantly weaker than my left, resulting in a limp handshake. Anyone who's been in the business world knows how damning a weak handshake can be. So fine, snowflakes, if you can get people to ask me which hand I prefer to shake with to ensure I give a firm handshake when it matters, I'll start researching random made-up words to use with crazy people who can't accept the fact that they are either male or female, and figuring out what holidays people celebrate before resorting to my typical Merry Christmas. Geez, I can't even find a decent argument against the religious aspects of Christmas, nor celebrating the holiday to begin with. So this is your call to arms this week, people. Tweet me at Squeak_Attack with the most ridiculous argument you've heard against either of these topics or how you put these pansies in their places. We need to move on to something people are actually going to care about. Roy Moore. Remember that Senate hopeful from Alabama who lost the election last week? Yeah, he lost the election to Doug Jones, Democrat, and this was surprising given the fact that Alabama is currently a very red state, at least in recent years, with a strong history of Democratic loyalty as well. But I think a lot of that really is due to the fact that the ideals of some of the Democratic Party before they became the party of, hey, let's just give everything away for free, appeal more to some of the more firm citizens of Alabama who have very staunch beliefs on a number of issues. Before the controversy, Moore had a moderate lead over Jones, roughly 8 to 9% depending on who you asked. So the Democrats responded with allegations of sexual misconduct, including accusations from, at the time, teenage girls, which is apparently the new black in Washington, and considering we don't have any credible evidence of said misconduct, even now, Republicans have every right to think this is all a little bit fishy, that there was some sort of collusion going on between the media, between these particular women, and possibly even between the Jones campaign. I mean, let's face it, the Democrats have a history of this. Again, Hillary Clinton killed Bernie Sanders' lawyer, put a hit out on him. It's not that hard to connect these dots. What does this really mean for America? It means the presumption of innocence is officially dead and buried in this country. To recap, U.S. legal code guarantees the presumption of innocence until a court finds you guilty, including a jury of 12 of your quote-unquote peers and a presiding judge in criminal investigations. Instead, however, just as they have for years on college campuses, progressive leftists have assumed the approach of ruin careers first, ask questions later. They assume that that's appropriate, and I'm willing to bet that next year we're going to hear multiple cases of GOP Senate and House candidates being accused of some form of misconduct, harassment, or inconsiderate language, all of which the lefties will translate to rape, R-A-P-E, rape. I mean, for crying out loud, they consider a man going up to a woman asking her if she wants to go out to dinner, just flat out asking her to her face, rape. So in other words, President Trump has approximately a year to get something done because unless, by the grace of God, we somehow have a high enough profile case of someone being accused of something and flat out being proven innocent, we're about to lose the Senate majority. And if we lose the Senate majority, Trump's not going to get anything done. He's barely making headway with the GOP to begin with. And the worst part? They failed miserably the last time they pulled this stunt when they accused the president himself of grabbing him by the pussy, ignoring the fact that he was able to, and they let him. They say insanity is repeating the same actions over and over and expecting different results. Well, the left has officially become the definition of insanity, and the worst part is it actually worked this time. Thank God they're planning the same tactics for the 2020 presidential election, though the highest office in the land is useless without a Congress to conquer. It's not looking good. Remember this, everyone. You are not allowed to be conservative. You are not allowed to run for office on the GOP ticket. You are not allowed to vote for Republicans without being accused of sexism, racism, or some form of irrational phobia. I've always found this funny, by the way, how they call it homophobia, xenophobia, and Islamophobia. It's that old, you don't hate us, you fear us BS I tried to pull when I was being pushed around by a crooked supervisor at my first job making tacos while still in high school. It's the kind of lie you tell when you lose an argument and have no other way to save face than to throw out a random non sequitur as your rebuttal. Or when you're so self-absorbed that you actually believe you're a necessary cog in the machine and not just a plastic knob on the exterior. It's the kind of BS a 16-year-old Squeak would say. We're not afraid of you. We're just annoyed by you. Please stop. Stop being annoying. Stop being entitled. Stop blowing up our subways, bus terminals, and office buildings. Okay, so there was this little thing that happened Thursday of last week that everyone has been complaining about, despite most people complaining about it having no idea what it actually is that they're complaining about. So yeah, it was a typical Thursday. The FCC voted to repeal the 2015 act Obama signed into law known as net neutrality, which everyone's complaining about for one reason or another. The left are arguing that they're going to be censored, which wasn't even part of the net neutrality agreement to begin with. You guys are thinking of the SOPA and PIPA bills, which were both shot down, by the way. Those were also from a few years ago, around the same time that net neutrality came out, but are otherwise completely irrelevant. Considering net neutrality being repealed lessens government involvement and control, you'd have to either be a total dingbat or completely delusional to believe that this repeal means the federal government is going to be able to censor anything. Meanwhile, the right is arguing that less government involvement will lead to free market politics taking over the way we are able to transmit data. Both sides are, in general, completely wrong on net neutrality. And while they both have valid points, regardless of the state of the internet, the end user will probably not see any major differences in performance. Why? Because several years ago, the FCC shut Comcast down when they tried to regulate and control how much bandwidth can be allocated to whichever task the person is doing online. Well, I've got news for you. Even now, under a neutral internet, companies still do that. My internet company does it all the time. The FCC is trying to shut these predatory practices down, but has significantly less oversight the smaller the telecom company is. Oh, but Family Guy said the FCC are bad guys. They even sang a song about it. Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot that the majority of my generation gets their politics from a raunchy partisan cartoon. This is going to take a while, isn't it? All right, let's take a deep breath. We'll start from the beginning. Let's look at the actual arguments for and against net neutrality and see what we can come up with. One argument against the free market theory I've seen a lot of is that the free market competition really doesn't matter if you live in an area where you only have one option for internet service or you move into a community where they only allow for one provider. And here's my simple rebuttal. You're choosing to move to a small rural town that only has one internet provider the same way you're choosing to have to drive 20 miles to the nearest Walmart. Okay? If it was really that much of a problem, live somewhere else. However, I do have some insight as someone with experience in the telecom field. Take the company AT&T, who provide fiber optic internet service throughout much of the South and Midwest of this country. They're still competing with Comcast, Spectrum, CenturyLink, Cox, and so on and so forth in many markets. Now, in theory, they could decide to be competitive in these markets and totalitarian in markets where they don't have any competition, thus giving the guy living in, say, Austin, Texas, unbridled access to any content, but restricting streaming services for the guy living in, say, Pflugerville, because they know he has fewer options for internet service. I don't know if that's actually the case in these two cities. I'm just throwing an example. Austin's a much larger city than Pflugerville. The problem with this is that just setting up software infrastructure to regulate this would cost AT&T, as an example, millions of dollars. This is why if you have their DSL service, you have to talk with 10 reps, 5 of whom have already told you you couldn't possibly have an account with AT&T because your information is not in the system. That system, by the way, only actually can access fiber optic accounts, not DSL. And then they get you to someone who can actually access your DSL account because AT&T believes they won't see any sort of profit increase from giving you access to decent customer service. Yeah, AT&T may be a huge company, but they're not exactly efficient financially. The reason they're trying to get people to order satellite TV instead of cable, despite having both types of service available throughout much of the country, is because they have yet to turn a substantial enough profit from their acquisition of DirecTV to justify having that on their roster compared to what they could have earned just by offering their Uverse line, which is fiber optic cable service, alone. Trust me, AT&T may be a large company, but there is very little wiggle room in their budget for discriminatory data transmission policies. They have to rely on a one-size-fits-all system, otherwise they wouldn't be able to sustain themselves. So the bottom line is, we have lived for decades in a world without a neutral net, and the world didn't end. Most companies probably won't be able to afford being stingy, even in markets where competition is slim. People are turning this into a partisan issue when in reality, it's just a topic most people are completely ill-informed on. There's really not much else to say. Meanwhile, when you look at the conservative camp, no, I don't think this is actually going to benefit anyone. I think everything's just going to sort of break even. We're going to have the same access to the same kinds of services. Maybe at some point we may see an increase in available bandwidth. But I don't think we're really going to see much in terms of free market politics in this kind of situation, considering most people don't know or care what kind of internet speeds they have. All they know is they can or can't watch Netflix with this internet plan that they just purchased. So I don't think this is actually going to benefit us in any way or harm us. I think we're just going to break even. Things are going to be just the way they were back in the earlier part of 2015. And that's fine. In other news, Trump Jr., son of President Trump, came under fire this past week because apparently he was obscene towards a female teacher when he was 3 years old. Virginia Heffernan, a quote-unquote journalist at Politico, claims her friend Anna allegedly had Trump Jr. curse her out in class one day. Keep in mind, there's no confirmation of who this Anna really is. Trump Jr. has not confirmed or denied that he told this teacher, and I'm going to say it without even censoring it just so you can hear the true brunt of his language.
Fuck you, bitch.
But as someone who has studied child development, I don't know of anyone who would hold this kind of language against a child, let alone a 3-year-old, for more than a minute. Just long enough to explain to the child that this behavior is wrong, and issue an appropriate punishment. And then, write it down and talk to his parents when they come to pick him up later that day. Seriously, what kind of psycho do you have to be? The worst part is that this op-ed writer, wait, is it still an op-ed if the opinion is completely contrary, the exact opposite of basic fact? Well, the worst part is she claimed Anna gave up teaching forever as a result of this. Well, that was preschool, more daycare work than actual teaching, so I can understand not having the financial obligation an elementary or secondary teacher might have, but come on. You stopped teaching. You gave up your passion. You gave up something you paid money to learn to do forever because an admittedly rich and probably somewhat haughty 3-year-old swore at you. Jesus Garcia, you can smell the fish a mile away. This Virginia Heffernan woman is a liar. They love attacking the president's family, don't they? They went after Trump Jr. 2 months ago because of an incident where he demonstrated socialism to his daughter by taking half of her Halloween candy. Boy, I'm just waiting for the illegally obtained surveillance footage of Ivanka and Jared Kushner denying one of their kids dessert because he or she wouldn't eat his or her vegetables. That's going to be a zinger, right? All right, speaking of zingers, how about them Down syndrome people, huh? No? Not funny? Of course not. Nobody with a soul would think that was funny. The Dutch, however, apparently think Down syndrome is a joke, as a very lighthearted video that recently surfaced would suggest, in which a government employee demonstrates to a man with Down syndrome, numerically, just how expensive he is for society to take care of. I'd play the clip for you here, but I doubt any of you speak Dutch. It's actually a clip from a documentary called The Last Downer, and the added burden per quote-unquote downer is about 48,000 euros or $56,000 per year. That's right, this isn't a man we're talking about, this is a burden on society. Oh, that's right, it's a society where everybody is paying into everyone else's healthcare coverage. It's a society where they discriminate against you because you're a few pounds overweight, even if you have a legitimate medical issue. It's just another example of Europe's failed healthcare model. Here in the US, we don't view autistic children, the elderly, or people with Down syndrome as burdens because we've traditionally treated this burden as a personal one and have built infrastructure around reducing the private cost to parents and caretakers. Some are claiming it's Nazi-level eugenic architecture. Well, I disagree. There's no malintent. They think they're doing good for the world. They legitimately believe these people are suffering. We talked about this last week. There's no need to belabor this part anymore, but it's still messed up. Leftists and their mob mentality politics, journalism, and social fascism. Leftism is why the president's family is being attacked over Halloween candy and fidget spinners. Leftism is why you can't say Merry Christmas at the office. Leftism is why you can't ask a coworker out. It's why you aren't allowed to enjoy the rights protected by the US Constitution, and why Europe flat out sucks nowadays. This mob mentality is why someone a few pounds overweight is believed to be a tax burden, because in Europe, everyone is actually paying for your healthcare coverage. And it's only going to lead to more programs like these, where they force abortions onto people via social pressure for fear that they might try to bring an undesirable into the world. We've said it before, the Nazis were socialists. It's in their name. Europe is officially a continent of Nazis. The Fuhrer died 70 some odd years young, that's all. They're bringing in Muslims who hate Jews and gays to call the herds. They're stripping their people of their guns and expanding their Lebensraum via coercion, trying to get countries that don't want anything to do with the European Union to have to join them. They're pushing around countries like Greece. They're still attacking the UK over Brexit. And now they're even bringing back Dachau-level eugenics programs. Doesn't it make you sick, people? It makes me sick. Well, the great state of Ohio is fighting back. State legislature now bars parents from abortions once the child is diagnosed with Down syndrome, as well as certain other disorders. If there's one thing Kazakhstan got right, it's this policy. Compare that to, again, the Netherlands, where they're currently exploring options of a quote-unquote soft death for people with mental illness or who are simply getting too old. They even encourage men in their 60s, just their 60s, by the way. Keep in mind, the average lifespan is almost 80 years old nowadays. But they're encouraging men in their 60s to die, to lay down their lives, just so their family can have some sort of financial incentive, instead of becoming a burden on their socialist healthcare system. Hospitals are offering medically assisted suicide to patients as an alternative to a painful death from disease because they refuse to treat the disease. Yeah, that's the alternative. No, we're not going to treat the disease. We're going to say, hey, you can either die painfully from the disease, or we're going to give you an easy way out. We saw this with Charlie Gard. They denied the kid what I think should be a right to seek medical treatment elsewhere because his parents were not satisfied with the treatment they were receiving. And they were able to pay for it out of pocket. They still would not even arrange it, make a phone call to allow him to have transportation to a hospital that would try to take care of him. Children with certain diseases in Belgium can even be put to sleep like sick or injured dogs, and no, not just while in the womb. Think you're safe on this side of the Atlantic? Nope. Canada is now offering euthanasia as a treatment for incurable diseases. And irreparable disorders are soon to follow, I guarantee you. And yes, the right to die laws now in some blue states like Oregon are leading to Americans being offered suicide drugs as an alternative to expensive treatment because the drugs are cheaper, because paying off the family's cheaper. Canadian doctors have even been revoked their licensure for having denied life-ending drugs to patients. And no, there is no consideration for the fact that both Christianity and Judaism forbid such practices. That would be heteronormative, so we can't have that. Discrimination is only discrimination when they want it to be. That's already the norm on the other side of the pond. For a continent and an ideology that places Darwinism over deism, you guys in Europe sure have forsaken survival instinct, haven't you? And now, that level of ignorance, which yes, is a virus in and of itself, is spreading overseas. And what's worse? You're not even allowed to be genetically European anymore. I mean, they're already calling people racist simply for having quote-unquote white pride and believing white lives matter just as much as black. DNA testing companies now. Yeah, those companies are paying money to tell your ancestry. They're actually pushing their political narrative by messing with your DNA test results. You know, those things you make your old Irish grandma spit into a tube and they tell her she's actually French and she has a heart attack and dies, and understandably so. Yeah, 23andMe. One of those companies has just admitted they have been intentionally screwing with results in order to, you're going to love this, in order to combat possible racism. Because white people are racist. All white people are racist. Just the fact. We all hate everyone who's not with us. Yeah. Here, let me explain. These tests, mind you, are BS to begin with. Siblings, including a set of triplets, have gotten completely different results even from the same company, and people who try out multiple companies oftentimes still get different results from each. See, with identical twins, triplets, and even a set of identical quadruplets they found, the results should have been 100% identical. That's what identical triplets are. The same one sperm, the same one egg merge and split into multiple identical beings. Even fraternal siblings, however, who share the same two parents should get the same ancestry results, right? Doesn't change the fact that I was born before Squeal. We still should have the same basic genetic structure, the same heritage. But no, not according to Inside Edition's investigation. They say these ancestry DNA kits are a scam. Don't trust them. What's even more of a scam, though, is how 23andMe decided to give applicants who checked off the box saying they are white a result of less than 1% African. Why? Because they believe only whites are racist, and that an umbrella solution to racism would be to tell all the white people they can that they are actually black themselves and therefore shouldn't be racist. Most people, of course, weren't shocked due to several reports that got a lot of media attention that claimed we all originated in Africa genetically and traveled to Europe and the Americas over time. Huge problem with that, though, is that we have the remains of people all over the world in Asia, the Americans, Australia, and Europe, all of whom can be dated back to roughly the same time period. So unless people are going from Africa to every other part of the world in a matter of a couple of years in these mass migrations, I don't think that's what happened. In other words, human DNA can be traced back geographically to pretty much everywhere under the sun, not just Africa. Media outlets remain silent, of course, because that would defy their narrative. Because they thought they had a good thing going, saying, well, nobody should be racist because everyone's African to begin with. Well, no, that's not true at all. I don't know which is worse. The fact that 23andMe is blind to the fact that racism is less common in the white population than the black and Hispanic populations, or how the media is selectively ignoring science and history to suit their own ideological agendas. But I digress. According to a quote from somewhere on Squawker, I don't know what's up with this site, but they really don't know how to write an article, post quotes. I seriously could not figure out who said this or in what context. Again, I digress. According to their article, one of the heads of 23andMe responded, and I quote, "Morgan and his colleagues were caught between a rock and a really want to mess with racist place. It would have been fun to throw a 10% West African in there, but then they might have a pissed off dangerous person at their office waving a gun. Since we couldn't do anything to the results and we wanted to, what we did was add less than 1% to each African category of ethnicity. That way we weren't lying, and they would be wondering how much under a percentage point that actually was. We always try to round to the nearest number because we sometimes hear about percentage points, but for them, we leave it open to whether it's a 1 or a 0. It's a compromise that's elegant in its passive-aggressive simplicity, and it got a result. The near N-bomb wrote to us asking what this meant, and we wrote back that it meant it was under 1%. We were not saying 0, unless they got another test that was going to bother them. Maybe they weren't 100% Caucasian. I mean, they were according to results. But this way it leaves it open, and they'll always be wondering. So, these bags of crap charge you $99 or $199 if you want their insight on various health risks your DNA carries to be told you might be racist by an admittedly bogus, probably fraudulent report that Inside Edition has proved to be complete and utter bullshit. Wow. But what's worse is that they're not only lying to their customers about the results of an already inaccurate test, but then they go and sell the data. They sell your personal data. Why? Because major companies such as Google and Facebook buy the data, which they can then use to market things to you. That's the real reason Facebook wants you to use your real name. That's the real reason Google logs every cat video or meme you search for. They want to collect your information and stockpile it in a massive database that can then be accessed by companies that sell things. And all at a very steep markup. Now they're compiling a list of people who may be racist by default according to their ideological scale. Disgusting, folks. Disgusting. So what are your thoughts at home? Tweet them at me. Seriously, tweet me. Squeak_Attack. Subscribe on iTunes, like our Facebook page, and join our discussion group. It may have been a mess, but it's still been a great week for America. Be seeing ya. Like what you heard? Hate what you heard? Want to see me dead? Follow me on Twitter at Squeak_Attack and join our Squeak Attack feed Facebook group and fan page. Rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes. Leave a comment on the blog. And as always, have a good day.